Welcome to Just Break Up, the podcast about love, heartbreak, and all the relationship advice you don't want to hear. My name is Sierra DeMulder.
And I'm Sam Blackwell. And today we're going to answer a letter from somebody who's living in ambivalence about potential future children. But before we begin, we just want to give you our Surgeon General's warning, which is that Sierra and I are not licensed mental health practitioners and sometimes forget the intro that we have said 27 million times.
And a half years. Okay, so here is today's letter. It's coming to us from CC, whose pronouns are she, her, who is writing to us from a swirling mess of conflicting emotions and indecision. Dear Sam and Sierra, I, 30, she, her, am happily married to my partner, who I'll call B, 30, he, him. When we got married a few years ago, neither of us felt sure about whether or not we wanted to have children. And though we did talk about it, we ultimately decided that we were certain that we wanted to be married and trusted that we'd figure out the kid question within our marriage at a later date. Well, now it's a later date, and I have several close friends who are pregnant or planning to be soon, and I'm feeling a ton of anxiety that we haven't come to a decision about this question. I feel and have communicated to be much more certain that I do want to have a kid or kids eventually as compared to when we got married. He has been receptive to this change in feeling, but still feels super ambivalent himself. The issue is that I'm having a lot of anxiety and discomfort in this undecided, uncertain space. I do think that part of this feeling comes from fears of being left behind by my friends who are having kids. It also comes from the fact that I like to cope with anxiety by making plans for the future, and I can't do that while my husband and I are not on the same page about our goals about wanting to have a family. And then, of course, there's a fertility anxiety and the societal narrative that I'm wasting the good years of my life. Oh my God, I have so many things to say about that.
Yeah, right.
Your early 30s, primo time to not have kids. Sorry. That's complicated for everybody, but I just wanted to say that. So many of the ads I get online right now are about egg freezing, which makes me feel like if I have fertility issues later on or a child with a genetic condition, that it's my own fault. I simultaneously hate this way of thinking and reject it, but also kind of believe it.
That's so relatable.
I know that. I feel like we should make a t-shirt out of that about like any of our inherited beliefs,
100%.
Like I hate it and I reject it and I also believe it.
Yeah, it's still in there though, unfortunately.
Yeah. Any advice about coping with living in ambivalence? The truth is that even if my husband said he wanted kids, we're not ready yet. I think my brain just craves permission to make a plan so that I can feel in control of the situation. On the other hand, is it reasonable for me to push my husband harder to come to a decision? My friends who have certainty about having kids thinks I should, but it doesn't feel right to me in my gut. Any musings, advice, reframes, or just an outside perspective would be so appreciated. Love, C.
All right, C, thank you so much for writing to us and for trusting us with this question. I think that probably a lot of people relate to this, particularly of the age demographic that you are. I think that there's a lot of ideas around when people should be having babies and the fact that they should be having babies, because all of us apparently should be having babies is the societal narrative that we're
Sam.
sitting on. Yeah, absolutely. I'll try.
Procreate.
Yeah, absolutely. And also just that feeling of ambiguity. I think what's really interesting about kind of the age that you're currently at, and maybe other people can relate to this, is that like my experience of my 30s was that suddenly all of the life markers that had been set up for me were kind of like done. And I was like, wait, so now I just like live my life? wait a minute. Isn't there somebody who's going to tell me exactly what I should be doing all the time? And like, why do I not know? Like there should be a plan, And I think that transition into a different phase of adulthood can be like really, really challenging. I know it was for me. And I'm sure that this like ambiguity around like, oh, there's no like right or wrong. There's just like a bunch of different decisions to make is a lot. And especially dealing with kind of the crunchiness that you and your partner have in this moment of you being more certain about wanting to have kids and him being ambivalent is it's just one of those things that happens in relationships where there's disagreement or we're not on the same page. And like that can be really uncomfortable as well. So you're in it. Like that's all I can say at this moment is that you're really in it. And everything that you're saying about how you're feeling and the discomfort that you're experiencing makes 100% sense to me. Absolutely. I think lots of people in the same situation would feel just as uncomfortable. And, I think that part of what we'll talk about is sitting in the discomfort of not knowing, right? And sitting in the reality that all of our life decisions aren't necessarily laid out for us, and that sometimes we just have to be okay with not knowing in one particular moment what's going to happen next. And that is really hard. So all sorts of love and empathy and support for you. We're going to get into a little bit more after we take our break.
All right, my darling, welcome back. And thank you so much for this question. I really appreciate it. And I know that when I was 30 and dumped, I was having comparable feelings of like, oh my God, I got to do something, or else if I don't set this domino in motion right now, I'm going to have nothing. Do you know what I mean? And really, what you said too about like hating and rejecting, but also believing the societal narrative of that ticking clock, that wasted time, the value that society puts on parents versus child-free people. It's all sorts of weird shit out there, especially in this fucking election season. But yes, anyway, so thank you for this letter. I'm going to try to, as you asked, I'm going to try to like reframe things or restate them in a way that maybe feels like a little bit easier to handle. Because the truth is, you do have permission to make a plan, and God laughs at plans, or whoever is up there in the clouds or under the earth or in the ether. You know what I mean?
Wherever they exist.
Yeah. The universe laughs at plans, right? So yes, oh my God, you have every permission to make a plan. I'm a huge planner. Planning also subsides or takes care of my anxiety for me. But, let's, from one anxious planner to another, what can we plan here? Number one, you're in your 30s, your early 30s with your husband. The one thing I'd love for you to plan is to have more conversations with your partner about having a family, right? I think some of the anxiety right now is happening from the idea that you need to have a conversation that results in a answer that allows you to set into place the next 5 steps, right? But you're not there yet. You're actually at this great stage where you and your partner can be like, you know what, for the next 6 months, let's just really be open to picturing our life with children, picturing life as parents. What are our hesitations? What are our fears? What are you afraid of? This is the opportunity for really vulnerable but growing conversations between you and your partner, because it's not just going to shape whether or not you two are parents. It's going to continue to shape your partnership and your life together. What are your goals? What are your values? What are you afraid of? What do you want when you're 40? What do you want when you're retired? I think that our anxiety wants it to be a yes or no question. And it's way more than that. Don't get me wrong. I'm so thankful that my wife right now in the marriage that I'm in right now, it was like a pretty much yes and yes conversation, because the relationship before that, the one that I was like so desperate to make work, it was maybe we'll see. And that my anxiety was like, I'm going to freak out.
That whole relationship was maybe we'll see, except for when he was like, I'm going to marry you, but with no actual specifics around it.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe we'll see, but let me fuck these other people first. Anyway, so I want to speak directly to your planning anxiety and say, you're desperate for this to be a yes or no, a 5-step plan. You're not there yet. I want you to rest your nervous system. Just because you're feeling anxious doesn't mean you can't feel these waves and let them pass over you. This is the time to talk to your partner, though. I'm not saying don't talk to them. I'm not saying put it away for a rainy day. I'm saying, hey, let's welcome in active conversations about what it would look like to have children or to not have children. And then you can really explore the bounds of that, because nothing's guaranteed. Nothing is plannable right now, other than you could vaguely say, cool, if you want to have a baby, let's start trying in a couple years. That's reasonable to me too. But recognize that this is an opportunity for intimacy and for a deeper yes. Instead of being in this nebulous, anxiety-ridden, well, we'll talk about it soon, or like, yeah, probably. You know what I mean? So I would say that is probably my first thing, only because you're in a happy, loving partnership. You're at a great time in your life where you're not ready to have kids, but you're ready to start talking about it. You're feeling more sure that you want to, and don't get me wrong, it's going to be crunchy, right? It's going to be vulnerable. That doesn't mean your timeline is speeding up. That doesn't mean something's wrong just because your partner might not have that same percentage interest that you do. Doesn't mean anything's wrong, right? You two are different people. You're coming at this from totally different realities. This is an opportunity for growth for you two.
For sure. Absolutely. And I think Sierra's right that part of the work now is not to get in 100% alignment, but the work is to have the conversations consistently and possibly even to set a deadline for yourself about when that decision will be made. Like maybe that is the plan that can offer you a little bit more stability to say, by the time that we are 32, we're going to have decided yes or no on the kids question. And in order to get there, we're going to have conversations every month about how we're feeling, and we're going to do some investigating, right? Like, can you build out a plan for you to help you not necessarily get to kids, but to get to a decision about kids that makes you feel like you have a little bit more control over the situation, which at the same time is in some ways out of your control. And I'll also name too that I think some of the big life decisions that I've made have been for sure through some careful consideration, but also just because suddenly the wheels start turning and things start to happen, where it's we didn't necessarily sit down and carefully plan every aspect of this, but we're like, wait a minute, let's start moving. And then things just kind of keep going. Right. And that might also be part of this as well. Maybe there will get to a point where you are both in this place where it's actually, cool, let's get started. And then it happens. Right. I don't know that everything in our life has to be carefully planned in order for it to be successful. There are places in which things just kind of come together because they're just moving in that direction. And that might also be something that happens here, right? As your partner sees more of your friends having kids and sees what that looks like in their life and sees what it looks like for, the other men in his life to also have kids, maybe that will help him understand what it would look like more deeply, right? All of those things are out of our control, but they may also be true. And part of, I think, living in ambiguity is just kind of accepting the fact that there's lots out of our control, but we do have the ability to decide how we want to embrace that lack of control and how we want to talk about it and how we want to hold it for ourselves, right? And I know that this is especially hard because of, again, that narrative around people with uteruses bodies begin to shrivel at the age of 16 until they are totally barren by the age of 30. That's the story that we've been told about what happens to people and their reproductive organs. And I just want to name, you're 30. There is so much time for you to decide what you want to do, right? I know that the narrative is if you don't have kids by 30, somehow you're failing. And we have lots of people in our lives who have their first child at, for example, 36, right? There's lots of different places where people can have children. And yes, that there are complications that may come with that, but also there are complications that come with almost every pregnancy, right? There's so many different ways in which our bodies may or may not do well with having kids. And so I want you to certainly understand that, of course, there is a timeline that happens, and also that the way that people talk about the timeline is extreme, and that there are lots of different ways that you can have children, not just right now, but also into the near future.
Correct. And I just...
Correct.
What?
I feel like I passed a test or something.
It's correct.
I was like, am I right
correct.
about bodies with uteruses? I don't I don't have
yeah.
one, so I'm not quite sure.
Yeah. You are correct. We do shrivel up and die after midnight once we hit 35.
Yeah, right. Of course.
We're kind of like a pumpkin rotting from the outside in or the inside out. There we go.
Love it. Love it.
Anyway, correct. I also wanted to add this thing about friends, because I think part of the societal thing that makes it tricky is that we see it everywhere, and like having babies does change friendships, you know what I mean? And it is valued on that relationship escalator more than other, I don't know, like raises and traveling and, hobbies. So I also want to speak to that anxiety really quickly and just say your relationships with people who are having children are going to change, but everything changes or it dies, right? Evolution is a part of our everyday existence. You will adapt to these new relationships, and they won't, quote, leave you behind, because it's not a race. You're not being compared to your friends, right? This is not a checklist life that we're going through. So you can't be, quote, left behind. You can adapt. Your friend might be more or less invested in your friendship because of what they have to give. But nobody's, quote, leaving you behind or getting more down that like game of life. They're not like winning more than you are. In fact, like oftentimes I feel like I'm, quote, I don't feel this way, but to use your words, like left behind by my child-free friends who are able to vacation, who are able to like stay up past 9 to like go to like cool sporting events, who can go out to eat on a whim, who can A, afford that, and B, don't have to like think about bedtimes or potty training or whatever. So there's no right or wrong way. There's no right or wrong path. I'm just highlighting this because, number one, it's not a race. It's not a competition. There's no checklist that you're failing at here. And two, everybody's lived experience has opportunity cost and opportunity gifts, right? Every lived experience. I would not trade anything to not have my daughter. Like, I love being a parent. And also I lust over the freedom that my friends have. I lust over the ability that they have to make more money and to go on vacation, and also, they're going to look at my life and see different things that I have, right? You know what I mean? So it's everybody's on a different path. There's no right or wrong path. There's no right or wrong choice here. So nobody's going to leave you in the dust, right? You're just each living your own unique, diverse lived experience, period. Correct.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like, I just want to name that this ambiguity that you're feeling, I don't think is unique to you. And I don't mean that to disparage you, to say that like you're not special, but I say that in a way to say like, yeah, I think a lot of people in their early 30s and beyond are in a place where they're like, what is my future going to look like? What sort of decisions do I need to be making now in order to be able to have the life that I want to at 35, 40, beyond, right? Like this is a time of a lot of options and not a lot of clarity around how those options can be used and what sort of result you're going to get from them. And so I want to just name that. I think that, having been in my 30s now for 6 or 7 years of them, right? Like sitting in that ambiguity is still uncomfortable. Like it's still not super fun to not know exactly what's going to happen, and not to like not have a guidebook to help us figure out exactly what the steps are to get what we want. And I think it's part of adulthood, right? It's part of living your life now. And there is a sort of sense of freedom that comes with that as well, because it does mean that it kind of requires a little bit of letting go, right? The idea that you can't predict everything, that there is no particular timeline to follow, that you're not going to be able to just do the things in the exact order to get the result that you want. And part of that is really scary, but part of that is a little bit liberating because it means that you don't have to hold yourself to something that doesn't work for you or to hold yourself to something that isn't getting what you want out of it. And I think that hopefully as time goes on and you begin to develop a little bit more comfort with the fact that you're not going to know everything anytime, right? Like that's just life, right? That's part of what this new phase of adulthood looks like, and welcome to it. And I just want to name that, like, you're going to get through this. And lots of people in your shoes are also experiencing something similar.
Yes. All right, my darling. We love you. Thank you so much for writing and trusting us with this letter. We hope this helps.
We hope this helps.
All right, it's Friday, everybody. Sorry.
Go ahead.
All right, it's Friday, everybody. So before we do our sign off, we're going to do our blind date segment. Every Friday, we like to shout out something that we love that we want to set you up with. And this week, we are sending you home with
voting. We are in a very consequential presidential election for sure. If you haven't seen things about it, I can't believe that because it's just been like everywhere. And we are also in the time where polls are open in most states. And if they're not, then we should also be getting ourselves registered or checking our registration. I know that this presidential election has been pretty fraught and folks have a lot of feelings about the candidates, which is deeply understandable. I will be voting for Kamala Harris, and I encourage you all to do so as well. I am very disappointed with her response and reaction to the genocide that's happening in Gaza. And also, I don't generally elect people that I love. I elect people who I think are going to be organizable and are going to listen to people like me and people who share my values. And I think that that is true of Kamala Harris. And I'll also say that so much of this election is not just about the federal stuff, but also about statewide stuff. And also local elections, which are super important, in this time when states have a lot of leeway to decide things about people's bodies, to decide whether or not they want to prosecute and persecute trans people, people of color. These elections are really important. And I know that the presidential election can be really discouraging in a lot of ways, but there are lots of great candidates in down ballot races that are hopefully doing amazing work and are fantastic. So please vote if you can. I know that that's not an option that's available to everyone, but also if you are not registered, please register. If you are registered or think you're registered, please check because people have been deleting stuff or deleting people from voter rolls because they don't want people to vote. If you're a young person and you are in college, request that absentee ballot so that you can make sure that you get that done as well. I just want to name that, and I want to encourage you all to vote for folks who are aligned with your values and to find people that work for you. I really hope that this election goes well, and it's going to take a lot of us to get out and vote in order to make that happen, not just in the presidential election, but also in all of our local and state elections as well. So please get out there, vote if you can, register if you can, and hopefully we can affect some change. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. If you would like more content from us, or if you would like access to our monthly office hours, you can support us on Patreon. If you support us on Patreon for as little as $5 a month, you'll get an additional bonus weekly episode, as well as access to those monthly office hours. That's patreon.com/justbreakuppod.
You can slide into our DM, send us your favorite relationship memes, but most importantly, you can submit your questions about all matters of the heart. Heartbreak, work drama, family issues, whatever.
All the things.
At justbreakuppod.com, which is also where you can find our heavily discounted merchandise.
Please remember to like, follow, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating and review. This literally keeps our mics on and helps us reach more brokenhearted souls who need two random strangers giving them relationship advice.
Just Break Up is a production of Duvid Media, original music, recording, editing, producing all magical things by our good friend Spencer Worth Davis. Make sure to check out his podcast and his music. And remember, Nothing is promised in the world. A plan is only something to lean our anxious little hearts on. The best thing we can do is cope with our anxiety, recognize what we do have control over, but also acknowledge that a lot of it is up in the air. Tomorrow's not guaranteed. So we can take a deep breath, comfort that nervous system, and tell ourselves we are exactly where we need to be right now in this moment. And if all else fails,
just break up.